this idea of what now is about taking your power back. It's about giving yourself space to grieve and cry it out when things have happened in your life that you have no control over. It's about remembering that tomorrow is not yet created, and it doesn't serve us to write a story before it's been written. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab, my very first episode of 2025. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and this is episode number 45, When the World is on Fire, What Now? This is very much inspired by the fires in LA that have been filling my feed for the past week. And by the time this lands, it will be even longer than that. And just really thinking about what it means to experience loss of great magnitude and how do we move forward. So whatever loss you may have experienced in your life recently, or that still hangs on to your energy, that still follows you where you go, I'm hoping this episode is of service to you to find your endings and your beginnings and what's possible for you now. If you are new to the podcast, welcome to the lab. I am so glad you're here. I am the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I provide inspiration, content, and practical tips at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. So whether you're looking for content for your conference, your next meeting, or you're considering one-on-one coaching, you can learn more at CoachTosca.com. That's Coach TOSCA.com. All right. So before I dive into the meat and potatoes of this particular podcast, I just want to give you a little bit of an update of where I've been, right? Because like the last podcast I released was mid-December. I'm coming to you from my rental property in Vermont. And let me tell you, I had no idea what this winter was going to contain. But what I've realized this winter is that I am into the wintering concept. Like I am into the going inward. I'm into the silencing of the external. I'm into the going slow, as most animals do this time of year, given the cold in this northern hemisphere. I say all this to say, right? Like I've been very sparse on social, and I've yet to draft my January newsletter for you because I am going slow and I am being deliberate and I am allowing myself to kind of get into the energy of 2025. And I'll be honest, most years, my new year really tends to begin in the spring. It tends to come during that spring equinox, really. But this year, it's a little bit different. I'm kind of feeling the newness. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Number one is that 2025 is actually a 9-year in numerology. If this is of interest to you, go research it, Google it, whatever. But the short of it is that a 9-year is about endings, like endings of cycles that have maybe been going on for 9 years, or maybe it's been going on for a couple of years, but it's usually like these bigger thematic endings in your life. And those endings can be major relationships. Those endings can be maybe where you even live, your home. It can be in your career, maybe endings of jobs, maybe endings of even the career that you're in, right? So it runs the gamut. That's because 2025 adds up to 9. I'm just honoring at the beginning of the year, right? That there's some cycles that are ending in my life. And I have been feeling this way for actually many months because actually in September, it was my birthday. I turned 45. And so I am also in a 9-year from my age perspective. In September, I was like, okay, I'm at the ending and I'm ready for beginnings. And I think in my perspective, a 9-year and endings also are part and parcel with the beginning. And the beginning may be at the same time. It may be in parallel. You might be in flux of things. Maybe your new beginning starts in 2026, which is a 1 year, right? Which kind of starts over the patterning, or I should say, not starting over the patterning, but creating new patterning and really new beginnings. And I'm just calling in for this year to really clear out the cobwebs of what's ending for me and truly start the new beginning. So you get to call that in for yourself too. And I just wanted to share where energetically I've been at. And and I'm inviting you to be in acceptance of where you've been at energetically in the start of this new year. Clearly in the US, we have new government changeover happening this month. There is a lot of endings and certainly new beginnings, right? There's uncertainty. And so for me, I've been in the practice of just deep grounding, right? That's kind of what this wintering phenom is for me. It's just grounding and not going too fast and not being in this chasing energy, but being in magnetization energy. And I'm welcoming that for you too, if it calls to you. I also do this thing in the beginning of the year where I try to kind of find my word of the year. Now, last year, it took me, quite frankly, until mid year to find my word. And right now, I'm feeling into a word already. I think in December, I was kind of already vibing on it. And that word is magic. And magic needs space, right? What comes to us needs space, it needs allowing. And so, again, that word magic kind of ties into my intention for the year, which is really to go slow, to allow space for things, and to know that I'm enough in each and every day and to unhook from hustle culture and all that good stuff and just to honor the true purpose of why I'm here today. Anyway, I thought I'd just share those things so you kind of get a sense of where my vibe is at. And maybe that will help inspire you for how you want to begin and how you want to end, right? Because your timeline is entirely yours and it doesn't matter when the calendar flips, you can start anew at any moment. And by the way, there's another really big new moment happening this month for sure. At the end of the month, I think it's January 28th, is the Chinese New Year. So if you're vibing, you want that to be your new year because these first few weeks were really tough, then by all means, claim that for yourself. Or maybe you want to claim it at the next new moon, which let me see when that is. That's the 29th. So it's also around that Lunar New Year, that Chinese New Year timeframe. So I just invite you to consider what it is you need for your intent to find your ending, to find your new beginning. All right. So now that we've had that kind of state of the union where I've been, I want to jump into this idea of what happens when we feel like things are up in flames and what do we do now? And what happens when we feel like our world is on fire? I've been watching all these images from the LA fires, and I've been in deep reflection about that. To lose all your belongings, how do you rebuild? How do you grieve? What is that process? How do you find hope? And in my very last podcast episode of 2024, the title was Finding Hope in a Hopeless Place. And so, in a way, maybe this is a bit of a bridge from that. And let me be clear, I have never experienced a burn to the ground house fire in my life. So, I'm not going to presume to know the depth of that experience. Yet, I do know what it's like to experience loss and feeling like your life is completely upside down. So I want to share some ideas based on some of my experiences, and hopefully it's helpful to you regardless of what you've been experiencing. So like I said, I don't know what it's like for you to lose all your belongings, but what I do know about is how we rise in the ashes of our grief, whatever that grief is. And I also have a little bit of appreciation for this kind of experience because of a book that I read by Jen T. Grace, who, by the way, I did interview on this podcast. And if you haven't heard it, highly recommend going back to it. But she wrote a memoir called House on Fire. At its core, well, that book is beautiful because to me, it's about at the core non judgment and empathy. But she also talks about how you never really recover from losing everything from a house fire. Anyway, if that calls to you, check it out. It's a beautiful book. And I think if empathy is something you're working on, if non judgment is something you're working on, it is going to be a beautiful book for you to read. I think when big things happen to us, like some of the things I've mentioned around loss, it's easy to get into this pattern of why me? I think I was in that questioning pattern for many years of my life, whether that's asking, why me? Why did I have to be born looking different? Why me? Why did I get type 1 diabetes after all my surgeries were finally done? Why was my career journey so hard? Why did it feel so hard? Why is my entrepreneurial journey felt so hard and uphill and all the things, right? And I've learned that there's a better question. And the better question is, what now? This comes from recognizing that I do have power. I have immense power. And there are a finite amount of things that I can control. And so why not focus on that? Why not focus on what I could do and what I could control versus coming from this place of why me, which really has no answer? And listen, the what now is not about bypassing anything. Okay. The what now could be about allowing the grief. Because, of course, when we have big loss, we have to give ourselves permission to grieve and give ourselves all the space that is required for that. And I've worked with some folks, especially recently, that have had really big loss in their life. And what they want to do is say, okay, I'm going to be done grieving by X date. It's like we want to be in control of that grieving process. And that's not within our control. So we have to keep allowing for what we need and what now. It could also be giving yourself permission to sit in the muck. This what now could be, I actually don't know what now. And I'm just going to sit with the not knowing, right? And it could be about acknowledging you need some support and some help in that question of what now. Again, I just want to reiterate that when we experience really hard things in life, I highly recommend focusing on asking yourself, what now versus why me? I think it's going to be so much more supportive. Now, in time, I realized that there's another question that can be super powerful, and it's a practice, right? It's not something that you can go from this energy of why me, and start asking yourself a vastly different question. I think what now is a nice bridge. But one of the things that I've learned to also ask myself in very difficult moments was and is, what was I meant to learn from this experience? What am I to take away? How did this experience happen for me and not to me? Now, when you're in the middle of the muck and of the grief, that can be a really hard question to ask. And it may not be the one that you need to ask right away. I've gotten to the point in my life where I ask that question as soon as I possibly can because it helps me find the way forward to what now. But again, everybody's on their own journey. I just offer that as maybe something to work towards. And like I said, if we're just, thinking about LA fires and if you've been impacted in that, right? Like that kind of question might be antagonizing for you, right? Why did this happen? What am I learning from it? So just wait for it. And you know what? Sometimes that kind of question you can't answer until you get some great distance between those big things. Now, sometimes you might be able to see it right away. And I think you're able to see it right away if you are in that energy of self growth and self reflection and self assessment. It becomes a muscle that is readily available to you if you are in that work of your life. So I'll just say that this idea of what now is about taking your power back. It's about giving yourself space to grieve and cry it out when things have happened in your life that you have no control over. It's about remembering that tomorrow is not yet created. And it doesn't serve us to write a story before it's been written. What now is about finding your people and honoring that you are never alone, no matter what's happening, and that reaching out and finding support and connecting to your community is your birthright. What now is about remembering that you have everything that you need right now in this moment. What now is about finding glimmers of gratitude in your life, even in the hardest moments, as a grounding, as a recentering, as an honoring that in this moment, you are okay. What now is also about finding humor and finding levity wherever you can find it. It's about finding that crack in the clouds, finding that ray of sun. These things are very helpful and important. They help you stay out of pity parties. They help you stay out of destructive behaviors and thoughts. And it reminds you that you are more powerful than you can ever imagine. And you can overcome incredible things. Now, look, there's a lot out there about, don't help people find hope when they're hopeless. Like, don't bypass the hard feelings. And that is not what I'm doing. I just want to be clear. But what I believe is the sooner that we can find the silver lining, the sooner that we can see the light in the darkness, is the sooner that we can come out of the mud that we are in. The sooner we will rise out of the ashes like the phoenix and find our new beginning. And that is what I'm inviting for you, no matter what you are going through. Now, sometimes I have to come back to this too. And I live a privileged life. I live a good life. But of course, I can't compare my hardships to anybody else. I just have to honor. Sometimes I go through hard times. I go through hard emotional times. I go through hard physical times, all the things, right? And I come back to gratitude in those times, not to circumvent my feelings, but to remember what I do have. And there's a great example of this that happened really, really recently. I wasn't even in the dumps, to be honest. I was actually feeling pretty good. And I just happened to see a feed in my Instagram that was a reminder of how lucky I am to be alive right now, because it was honoring the anniversary that on January 11th of 1922 was the first time somebody was given a life-saving insulin shot. And I sat there and just kind of pulled back and just kind of went, wow, how lucky am I to be alive right now? Because 100 years ago, I may not have survived my health diagnosis. That kind of perspective taking, that kind of like zooming way the heck out of your life can be a really helpful tool. Whether you're kind of having a shit morning, whether you're having a devastating era in your life, whatever it is, but to really zoom back and say, what's true here for me? Taking the biggest view I can of my life. I've found that to be really helpful in so many situations in my life. And I hope it is for you too. I know I've kind of been going on here. I'm kind of really fired up about finding the goodness in 2025, about finding the possibility when things end that something new is beginning, some new phase, some new belief about yourself. Fill in the blank. What new is happening for you? What new beginning are you claiming for yourself? What intent for how you move through your days and your weeks and your hard moments? And if you need to go back and do some reflecting to help you end whatever period you are ending, then do that too. And if you missed my episode in December, I did a podcast episode on closing out chapters. So if you need to go back and you need to close out the chapter that you've been in, the season you've been in, maybe you didn't really get the time in 2024 to honor what that season was for you, I highly recommend going back to episode 43, How to Wrap Up a Season with a Bow. that might be of service if you're wanting to go back and just kind of honor your season, honor your ending so that you can start your new beginning this January 2025 if it calls to you to do some kind of reflection practice like that. I'm so glad you joined me in the Unlock Lab. If you've gotten something from this episode, please like, rate, and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, and send it to a friend if you know somebody that could benefit from this conversation today. Be that light for that other person in the darkness. Help them find their way as you find yours. It usually goes hand in hand. When we help somebody else, we help ourselves. Give it a try. I look forward to seeing you next time in the Unlock Lab, and ciao for now.